thank all the three panelists for accepting my invitation and to start this thought-provoking lecture. The first, I will hand over the mic to Dr. Bhagatji, so he will be giving a brief of Devadasi's tradition. Later, Karuna will take over and Anupama will conclude. After that, we will be having a question-answer session.
Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. Dr. Vidya Rao and most distinguished panelists, some very, very senior friends here, highly learned people in the field of dance, dance theory, practice, my young friends here. Although every part of India is beautiful and offers so much to learn, particularly in the field of arts. But there are certain places which are great repositories, and Bangalore is certainly one of them. I am never satiated by any visit here. I came to this city for the first time in 1968, long time back. It was a different city then. Most of you were probably not even born, very few. However, it is a beacon light of arts today as it was then. So the essential things survived. Many things have changed. I know it's not pleasant to move around in Bangalore anymore. And in 1968, it was a garden. The whole town was a garden. It was so beautiful. But then, if you preserve the most essential, then it helps you live with certain other less beautiful things. And that example is set by the city. Now, in such a learned company with such enthusiastic people and people who are practicing and creating dance, I don't know how much I can contribute and how much I can add to your knowledge. Perhaps very little. But I just try to put before you just 2 or 3 things which are important today because there are certain controversies which have come about regarding the assessment of a very important phase of dance or dance history. Namely, the role, the activity, the status of the Devadasis, right? Now, people forget that this institution is not what it was just 300 or 400 years ago. You see. The largest number of books have been written on just what the system was. A very good book I read, I think that was almost, and I met the lady who wrote the book. I met her in Chennai. I think a Dutch lady. Saskia. Yeah, Saskia Kersenboom's story. Yeah, right. And I had the occasion to talk to her at length after reading her book because we were both visiting the Music Academy. It's a long time back. Again, perhaps 81 or something like that. Then I read some other books casually, but that I thought was a very thorough study. And apart from that, I was able to see that the last phase of Devadasis was like, before Pranant, when things kind of just come to an end. And what has been documented about it is just that. People have not tried at all to talk about where it began, what are the earliest examples, perhaps in sculpture or perhaps in some other texts, you see, about it, and why it began. See. And then, the other most important thing is to see that the Devadasi Nritya or Devadasi Archana, because fundamentally it is an archana, it is an offering to the deity 3 times a day, 4 times a day, whatever is the temple regulation. That is one kind of dance. In the whole ambit of theatre, theatrical dance, different kinds of dance performances that happened and the different genres over a period, over the length and breadth of India, that was one kind of dance. Dance to be done in the temple before the deity. And it was part of puja. It was part of puja. Just as the mantras were recited, just as stutis were done, just as there was what is called nirajan, or showing the lights, or that the vastra alankar was done. All the things that go on with the deity throughout the day, this was one thing of entertaining the deity, of pleasing the deity. And that was the temple worship. And this obviously begins as early as the temple itself. It was part of it because worship in the Indian tradition, the Hindu tradition, is manasa vacha karma. Through mind, that is, I come and have darshan of the vigraha, of the Prabhu, the male or the female devata which is there, Dev or Devi. I have darshan with my eyes, then I say something, or I pray, or I sing as a devotee, and if I am capable, then I dance. And all that is done in order to please the deity. So that's the fundamental thing, and it has to be done in as many methods and as many ways possible. Now this is the crux of temple worship, and it is unique. It has been done in this way partially all over the world. Like offering, making offering, giving oblations, making sacrifices. This had been done in the Greek culture, Egyptian, various other cultures it has happened. But this total completeness, and with dance which is full of joy, full of exhilaration, and full of devotion to entertain and please the deity. This is a very specific Hindu art, Hindu ritual, Hindu worship, archana, which had started as soon as the temples became complicated temples. Now, I wish that somebody compiles all the records right from 6th and 5th century, because they are there. in all these great temples, it's not as if that this happened in some part of it. Because this whole vision and this whole practice was an all India practice. And there are records, and if we go and do the research, we will be able to find, I'm sure, the name of dancers and the grants and other things, just as we find it at the Rajarajeshwara Chola temple. There are some records that we have. Similarly, we will find in other parts of the country also. And I hope that this will happen one day when the fever of secularism has subsided from Indian culture. Then we will really look into our ancestors' contribution, how tangible, how real, and how creative it was. Now, what we have as records of the last period is when the temples were in shambles. Because the temples were beautiful and flourishing when there was ashraya or patronage. So ashrayena shobhante pandita panitarata. Right? So if you don't have patronage or you don't provide, and there is no system there. Now that is the time in the British rule when these women did not have their usual way of sustenance, and they had to establish some sort of relationships which were perhaps not definable according to the Victorian customs. You see, that's what's important. We have very little idea about our institution of marriage. For instance, Manu has 8 kinds of marriage. Today it's only one, Brahma Vivaha. I was reading about 3 years ago, there was a very painful case in Meerut. Somebody molested her. And after a while the families agreed that, okay, we'll make it into a marriage. But the judge, the first civil judge, he said this cannot be. Because it's pure and simple a case of rape. Now undoubtedly, it is a case of rape, but then something else has happened. The families have agreed, and there was nobody to tell that judge that according to Manu, it is a perfect legal Rakshas Vivaha. Now this does not mean that this is to be done. Because Manu himself says that Pishach and Rakshas, these are 2 kinds of marriages which are the worst and which should not be practiced. But then you see, these are stopgaps. And tradition has to provide, or law has to provide, for all kinds of situations. If it is to be a humanitarian, you just cannot have a yardstick of morality which you apply to everybody, to all professions, to all situations, to all practitioners of art, of philosophy, of science, you see. But then unfortunately, that is the kind of thought which our rulers, the British, had. They, with their Christian background, they had only one system of morality, the commandments. And there was no room of adjustment, at least on paper. In practice, it's a different matter. So, the idea that the institution of Devadasis was such that in that a woman had dedicated her life to the deity, was totally alien to the Christian man. How can you do this? You have to be a nun in order to do it. To be a bride of Christ in a monastery, which is the Christian way, you just cannot go around dancing and wearing all these are lines of Milton. Till the time Jesus comes, God sends His own Son, and if you have faith in Him, then you will go to heaven. So the idea that sexuality is beautiful is totally alien to the Christian mind. And therefore, singing and dancing and all these erotic songs and presenting all this Rati Krida or all the Vilasa, as Jayadev said, right at the beginning of his verses, was unacceptable. So what they wanted was, they wanted India to be saved of this sin. And therefore this institution had to be abolished, plain and simple. And then you created a whole reason, a justification for abolishing it. And then you also made an act, I forget when that act was. No, I think it was a little earlier, 23 or something like that. Yes. But the act was made around 23 or something like that. That you cannot dance in it anymore. That's it. Thank you, man. I had that memory. Now, this is the justification. Now, we know all this. There is no need for me to go on repeating it. What is the situation? If you look at the history of how women have been dressing and wearing clothes in the last 1,000 years in Europe, if you see some paintings, say 1,200-year-old painting or one, then all you will see that a woman could show her face and hands. Nothing. Everything else was parda, or what is called in Islam hijab. So it was exactly the same. The Christian women were dressing in total hijab. Right? And now, what is the best dress? Bikini. So from 1,000 years, from one end to another, no balance in between. And now, as something which I am going to say, most people ask me not to say. But then I get so tempted when I am among young people, especially among dancers.
There are many things that you're going to say which you can't say.
You see, if you look at European dress today, what does it aim to show? It aims to show the figure, the actual realistic figure of the woman. You dress that way, finally now in tights and everything. Now, this has never happened in any civilization, anywhere in the world. The great civilizations of Egypt, of China, etc., women never dressed that way. Women only wanted you to just kind of guess the slimness or not so slimness of their figure, but they wanted many things more. They wanted you to understand how they moved, how they sat, how they stood up, how they smiled, and how they used color and clothing and texture in their dress to make a personality which just doesn't remember anymore something purely physical like a figure. But what do you have today? All the fashion designers are going just to that physicality. So you see, if the mind concentrates on the wrong thing, then you create a wrong kind of art. And then you create a wrong kind of aesthetics. So, what has happened today is, there is now a whole desire to wash off your sins and undergo a guilt trip. Right? So because women can see in paintings, European paintings, that they could show only their face. So they think the best dresses, which exposes the most, it whatever occasion. See, it's a whole reaction, which is cultural reaction, which is happening. So similarly, because they denounced Devadasis, now they somehow want to retrieve them. Arey, isme kuch to khasa. There was something very significant. There was something wonderful. There was something very valuable. Now they will still not talk about that the most valuable thing was that these women were so dedicated. That these women believed that by dancing they achieved moksha. Asli baat to ye hai na. That for them it was not just a profession, but it was a sadhana. So they will not come to that, or they have not come, the Europeans have not come to that as yet. So what do they have come to? They have come to their caste status. They have come to their class. They are now looking upon them as women who preserved art, although they were marginalized, tortured, as a result of all those machinations of evil Brahmins and patriarchies and men, etc. So the discourse today is this. And then the second thing is that they had the real art. And when this art was revived, let's say in Music Academy Madras by V. Raghavan and various other great stalwarts, I mean there were so many, we all know them, great men. Then they somehow Brahminized it. You see, they left out certain very essential elements. So, the real art is lost and it is yet to be discovered. So, you are creating a mystique about this now and sympathizing with those women, and you are creating the whole discourse about the social status of the women, not the art. Now, there's one thing we must all remember, and that applies not just to dance or Devadasis or India or Sanskrit or any Kannada or Tamil. The artist as a person, man or woman, is different from the product of art that he or she produces. I am not. I, the individual belonging to a place, belonging to a status, speaking a language, eating a food, I am not important or significant. But what is significant is what I have given, the art form that I have. So the art form is important. The Devadasi was dancing a certain kind of nritya, natya, whatever you may like to call it. Where does it come from? Does it not come from a tradition? What is the history of it? How was this form quite different, let us say, from other forms which were being practiced in India? Now, this is dance connected with the wide dance which was practiced all over India. And the total dance which was practiced in India has been very largely encoded in the Natya Shastra as to what are the essentials and the fundamentals. And those essentials and fundamentals, they have been put to practice in such a huge variety all over the country. We have some records of it, we can see a few things, we can see some sculptures, we can see some other texts, some later musicological texts. But they have always been transformed, and yet certain fundamental principles existed. The Devadasis were doing both. They were practicing the essential elements of art. In the language of dance, they were practicing the karanas, the angaharas, they were doing all the charis, etc. But they had adjusted it to a particular form of devarjana. Because whole of Indian art underwent a big change after the advent of Islam. It underwent change because the audience changed. And you know, art is all the time dependent on audience. No matter how great an artist, he would have to perform according to the audience, according to the samaj. So he'll have to adjust as the creative people do it. The tradition, which was very expensive and which was produced as total theatre, in which you had all kinds of abhinay, in which you had all kinds of acting, in which you have all the dhruvas and songs and the story, and a single play like Abhigyan Shakuntalam would not be performed in 2 hours as it is done now, but it would take a week, a few hours each day, right? So there was so much more done. Now that art form disappeared because urban theatre disappeared in India around 12th, 13th century. For the very simple reason that it was not allowed to be performed. Islam did not allow theatre, does not approve of theatre. So theatre and most of the arts went outside the city, into the ashramas, into different kinds of religious places, and hence most of the art became worship oriented only. And hence the Devadasi Nritya became worship oriented only. Earlier they were the people who would be not just doing or teaching or be in touch with just the temple tradition, but they would be in touch with various other traditions. Then the question of their varana or their jati caste. If they were highly respectable, if they were rich, if they made millions like Bollywood actresses do today, then they would be highly respectable. There is this verse of Gita Govind, Padmavati Charana Charana Chakravarti. So Padmavati here is Radha, but Padmavati was also the, well, some people say wife, others say the chief dancer of Jayadev's time at Jagannath. So Padmavati, so he calls himself Charana Chakravarti. He is one of the persons who worships her feet. So you cannot think of the Devadasi system in those derogatory, dirty terms as you have been taught. See, and of course this applies to the whole of Indian history. Now, where do we take it? The question is, if there are some people who claim that they've learned from certain Devadasi, then they are all to be valued, they are all to be welcomed. But I would hesitate to say that their art in some ways more authentic than the art which was revived at a later stage or replaced. Because I see no logic about it. After all, when this great revival or adjustment to modern middle class consumption took place, and so-called Sadir Nach, this was the term for the dance at the court. Right? Temple dance was different, that was Devadasi, Nritya or Archana in the temple, but the same thing was also being danced in the court, and it was called Sadir Nach. Sadir is a slight distortion of the Persian word Sadr, which means the chief, and Sadr Darbar or Sadr means the main Darbar or the king's ruler's court. Now, if somebody says that I have a tradition either from Sadir Nach or if I have a tradition from the Devadasi, then it is not something more authentic or just more real than what was done by Rukmani Arundale and others. Because dance is always recreated. After all, you are recreating it from certain fundamentals. Those fundamentals are in practice, they are also in books. There are 108 Karanas and perhaps one can only see 25 or 30 in practice today. But they can be recreated, and they have been created and recreated. Shastra has been used for Prayog, and Prayog has created new Shastra. So to say that my tradition, whether a tradition of the Devadasi or my tradition, whether of the Sadir Nach or of Kalakshetra, is exclusively authentic, doesn't stand to reason. What you have to see is, are you able to draw the best thing and create it according to certain principles of dance, which have been handed down. Otherwise, it could not have been done. Why is it that nobody in, let us say, Greece is able to revive ancient Greek dance? There was this great lady, Dora Chachu, and Dora Chachu theatre for 50 years of very great effort, but this could not happen. It could not happen because not only the living tradition, but the living value doesn't exist. The living value is that we still have to do it. And we have to do it in all ways, all different ways of entertainment to different kinds of audience, of archana, of puja. One of the things which has always made me very sad is that in spite of 70 years of independence, perhaps there is not a single temple in India today where archana is done through dance. It is done occasionally somewhere here and there, but not as part of essential ritual. अब डांस की तो बात छोड़ दीजिए, भारत सरकार तो दिया जलाने के भी पैसे नहीं छोड़ना चाहती टेम्पल्स को. We have come to such a horrible pass that the governments and the endowment boards, they don't want to leave even money enough to burn oil lamp. But I think the day we start dancing as archana in a few temples in India, you would have done the greatest service to Devadasi. It's called in old language Tarpan. They deserve it. And we owe it to them.